I guess to start, when people hear about like an opposition to a baby box, I think there's a lot of curiosity that comes with that. And I know that you have a lot of reasons, but can you kind of like in a nutshell explain why you don't support these baby boxes like on a fundamental level?
I think I already told you this. So I am a conservative, right wing, pro lifer type guy.
Mm.
And so a lot of the community around these boxes tend to meet that demographic, would claim that they're conservative, pro. And I actually, when people start thinking about it, and the people that I know that are more passionate pro-lifers than I could claim to be in terms of their activity and their is that, we in terms of women with unplanned pregnancy, we can do so much better than encouraging them to put your baby in a box. Okay, we're going to help you by setting up a situation where you put your baby in a box. What I think what we need to be doing is, and I think what a lot of crisis pregnancy centers do, is what they're encouraging is they want women in those situations to come forward so that they can get proper prenatal care, have a proper medical delivery, fully know their adoption and custody options, which I'll come back to real quick, have access to counseling, and know their help options to if they want to, assuming they need help getting their life together so they can keep and raise their child. What are those options? Because there's support, public support, and other options available. And they also need to understand the implications of a safe haven surrender. So, on the implications of a safe haven surrender, it creates a unique class of the child because they basically are surrendering all rights ever in perpetuity. And when you do adoption, a custody option, I'll cut to it in a second, but like adoption, there's still a record. There's still, it could be sealed by a court, but there's still a record. And if the child, in some point, the parent and the child want to reunite at some point when they're older, which Monica Kelsey did, she reunited with her mother. Okay. And what I've found, I didn't know hardly anything about this, but most adoptees, people in the state of an unplanned pregnancy, bad situation, that are at this in this thing, there's the experience of others. There's a lot of knowledge of people in the adoptee rights community that know what is it, what are the, because sometimes you can make decisions now and then later look back, I'm going to go, I wish somebody would have, told me A, B, and C. And so, for example, any credible crisis pregnancy center, or adoption advocate is going to encourage women to do open adoption now, because through time, closed adoption, which means no connection ever again, theoretically, has been caused to actually be much more detrimental to the mental health of both the child and the mother. So, open adoption, where there's still a connection between the mother and the child, is what everybody recommends. But before they get there, and not to, a lot of times what I didn't even know I never, like I said, I didn't know a lot about this field, but now I feel like I've become a pseudo half baked expert. Is, one of the things that they want to encourage them is custody options. So a woman with an unplanned pregnancy can have a custody arrangement, like where a mom, a grandma, a friend takes possession of the baby at delivery, but it's not permanent. And at the point the mother is able to take the baby back, they can do so. And I tell you that, I'm obviously a man, I only have one kid, but I think, just anecdotally and talking to people, that can be a motivator for a woman who is in a bad place to, kind of a wake up call, like I want to have the chance to raise my kid. I want to get my life together. Can somebody help me? And I think as pro-lifers, we can do a lot more than spend exorbitant amounts of money on putting boxes into places where we specifically to me, are exploiting. I'm a conservative, so I don't like to use the word usually marginalized people, but I think this is a great example of exploiting marginalized people, because the target audience for these is women with unplanned pregnancy in crisis who don't feel like they have support. And if you go search, like if you go search right now on safe havens, you're going to find a lot of times, because they pay for all the search engines, that you're going to think putting your baby in a box is safe haven because they promote it that way. And if you look online, it's like, okay, this is what I do. So I know I'm good at long-winded answers, but you're, as you can tell, but those things, proper prenatal care, proper medical delivery. And then last thing, it's down that list, last thing I will say, if you have ever watched the Safe Haven Baby Box, it's like an 8.5 minute PSA they have on, and it depicts basically affluent, two affluent girls in high school. One gets pregnant. They live in the one that gets pregnant lives in a fancy house. You can see it's all Christmas decorated in the house, and she never tells her parents. Okay, she never asks for any help. Her and her friend find the Safe Haven Baby Box online. This is the story, and she never tells the father. So they imply that this boy in high school is the father, and never tells the father. Has the baby with no medical, never gets prenatal care. They show him getting like the old TV type thing is get towels and a knife or so, scissors and towels. And the girls, it's implied that they deliver the baby themselves and they put it and I say, this is all the wrong messaging. And what happens too is let me leave it at that. That is all the wrong messaging to be given out. And I am very pro-life, but I'll use this example. If people who were pro-abortion had the same kind of PSA saying, don't tell your mom or dad, go to the clinic, what have you, okay? Pro-lifers would be outraged. So we have to be ethically, morally, and logically, intellectually consistent in the notion of these kind of messages. If anything, we should all be working to destigmatize unplanned pregnancy so that people feel comfortable coming forward. And when pro-lifers, I don't think, people try to use, I say it's an excuse like, well, Roe v. Wade getting overturned is really like, and that's a little bit to me like of a red herring, but because, I think that the pro-life community should be united in the notion of destigmatizing, coming forward to get help, knowing adoption and custody options. My preference would be that there's no abortion options personally, but it's not Christian. It's not the hand of Jesus. It's not this to encourage somebody to make a decision that they might regret. I think of a woman putting a baby in that box, listening to the door slam because the door slams, okay, when they put it in there. And then a year later, realizing that she never knew about her adoption and custody options. And that is wrong. And that is morally, ethically, and intellectually wrong. How's that? That's like a 10-minute answer to your first.
No, but I appreciate
But I covered a lot of the stuff that probably
is
at the heart of this.
Yeah. So, you mentioned then we can do so much better. At least, how do you see doing better on that front of destigmatizing unplanned pregnancies?
I think that crisis pregnancy centers, making sure that people know. I think there should be much more promotion of what are adoption, custody, those kind of options, where you can get help if you want to raise your child. And I even did this in Claremont County, where now what county do you live in? You live in Hamilton, right? Is that
Hamilton?
Okay.
Yeah.
So in Claremont, I've never done this in Hamilton, but go try to find out if you were a woman with unplanned pregnancy and you were trying to figure out proactively your adoption, custody, other options, go try to figure that out. The websites are complete fastoosh. And I actually called once the closest thing I could find to a number in Claremont County for, adoption, I left a message, and that's been like 6 months ago, and nobody's ever called me back. So I think that the system is needs a lot of work in terms of women and frankly the fathers too being able to easily find the information and not in how would I say this, like in a fact-based way, not like somebody's trying to sell boxes, somebody's trying to do of just what those options are and how they could take advantage of them. Like in Ohio, there's a thing called Help Me Grow, which is a toll-free state number that's to help, and that number is not 24/7. And Monica Kelsey one time pointed this out like relentlessly, how Ohio stinks and they don't have. And so my answer is like, okay, that number should be 24/7. Okay. And that's the number that's supposed to connect people. It both covers, it would cover this type of situation, but it also covers if you have your child, and you have an issue, like I can't find formula, I can't, like things where you need help. It's supposed to be a universal kind of help number for parents to call, and that number should be 24/7.
So what I'm hearing you say there is you think there should be more options to like get information, not only about adoption, but you mentioned like prenatal care for women.
Yeah, all that, like,
Mhm.
and like, even, my wife's a professional artist and I'm a very logical guy, and you put those things together and I can give her stuff. Why don't you make this look nice? It's like having, I think every county should have a page you could go to that's what's your options for, how to get prenatal care help, how to get this, how to get this, how to get this. Like on a card. This is something for my condos. I made this card, okay, for people to put on their refrigerator. It has nothing to do with this subject. It has to do with, like, what's the after hours number, and stuff like this. Stuff that people always can't find this information. And so that kind of thing, why isn't, for example, I'm big into safe haven awareness signs, which is another topic we could cover, but why isn't this like in high school? Okay. Assuming now I'm 57, so I went to health class, in 1982 or three or something. I have no idea what health class is now, but that thing that says, how to get help, that kind of stuff. And I think there's things that would be, uh, there's obviously controversial things, okay, but there's a lot of straightforward things that if you are pregnant, knowing how to get help is, I don't think anybody should be opposed to that. And people bring up, like, on safe haven. Well, is safe haven, once you get to safe haven, a woman has a baby in her hands. Okay. And at that point in time, you need to make sure that she knows, first off, hopefully she came forward and got proper prenatal. Because I'll tell you what, I think now Safe Haven Baby Box says, I know the number went up. It's like, let's say 25 babies have ever been surrendered in boxes. Think of how many babies are stillborn and so forth due to lack of proper prenatal care and other things, including the Skylar Richardson case. So in our area, there was a case I think it was in Warren County, and if you search on this, you'll find it. And people use this example. Skylar Richardson was a high school girl that had a unplanned pregnancy. She found out about it. She was anorectic, so she had, like, and so she found out about it because she had a boyfriend, and her mom took her to get birth control. And I guess they do a pregnancy test when you're getting birth control. So she found out about it, but she was 18 at the time, and she didn't tell her mom. Okay. And she ended up trying to hide the pregnancy. And she had other mental health issues. And because, the funny part was, if you go read the articles, because she was gaining weight, she was actually getting compliments, because she had been anorectic and had issues with anorexia. And then she ended up having the baby stillborn in her bedroom. Okay. And then she buried it in the yard, the baby in the yard. And that's became a big case. And if you search on that, that's in our area, like down in Southwest Ohio, that's probably the number one case. And people say, like, well, if this, and I'm like, well, first off, the baby was stillborn, so baby box would not have helped. But what would have helped is proper prenatal care, proper medical delivery, destigmatization so she could tell her mom. Obviously, if the mom was taking her to get birth control, the mom wasn't some rogue TV depiction of some far right-wing zealot or something, like it. So that's, but that's one of the most prevalent, that's one of the most referenced cases in Ohio, especially in our part of the state, of something like that goes along the lines of unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah, sorry. I just
No
got a
problem.
notification that my computer's dying, so I'm just focusing. Well, then you mentioned there, like, education surrounding
Yeah.
safe haven laws. I guess, part of this is like looking at how well safe haven laws are working. Do you think they need to be expanded in any way, or just the promotion of them expanded?
I think that, like, if you look at Ohio, there, after they, like, Safe Haven started in maybe like 2001 or something like that, and they never did anything to promote it, anything. So Florida spends $300,000 a year on safe haven awareness billboards and stuff on highways. Whether that's a good use of money, I don't know, but they do. Okay, so I figured this out here. we never put on fire stations any sort of awareness signs. In Florida, they're not all on the stations, but all the stations have been provided with signs to put up, okay, about safe haven is available at that station. And they have very simple things on them. Don't leave a baby unattended because, knock on the door, and so because there's just in Ohio, there's been basically no education or promotion other than passing the law in 2001. Nothing really happened. And so one of the things for probably, I think I calculated at one point for, between $100,000, we could afford to put a safe haven awareness sign on every police station, fire station, and hospital in Ohio. Okay. And those are all safe haven in Ohio's law. Those are all safe haven places. And I think I told you when we talked before that I never hung out at fire stations, I never, you're younger, but you remember Emergency. Did you ever see the TV show Emergency that's about firemen at a firehouse?
I have never watched it myself, but
You've heard of
have
it?
heard
Okay.
people talk about it.
So I joke about it. It's like that shit depicted firemen as they're like playing football, cooking chili, hanging out. Well, most fire stations actually are very minimally staffed, like 2 firemen. And so they don't have it's not a place like a police station where people come up and knock on the door or go in the lobby to report something. So there's a lot of fire stations have it's like a sealed building, like you walk around like, do I knock on this door? Where do I knock on? And, so simple things too, like having an awareness sign that advise people where to knock, what to do, call, the good awareness signs also say like, if nobody present, call 911, don't leave a baby unattended. Because the number one thing there's evil people that dump their babies in dumpsters and in the woods and stuff like this, and they're going to keep being evil people. Even Monica Kelsey says that, okay? The issue that has come up sometimes is that people come to surrender a baby at one of these places, get there, can't figure out what to do, and they just leave the baby, and because they don't know what to do. And so at least at a minimum, there needs to be some instructions on these places to make them aware. Now, one last thing, and I'll try to shut up, is that ultimately I found that the people that have been into safe haven for decades, that were the pioneers of safe haven, they don't actually want babies to be safe havened. Okay? To them, it's basically like a way to raise awareness and get somebody to interact with somebody so that they can be informed of their adoption, so they don't want, as the guy in Florida says, ultimately we're not encouraging women to surrender their babies. We're encouraging women to get help. And I think that's a beautiful way that he says that is, so the safe haven promotes awareness. Of course, somebody can do it. Like you could just walk up and say, I'm not going to say anything. But they find that here, the guy here, there's not really any sort of real general safe haven organization in Ohio, but there is in Florida. And what they would say is the vast majority of women that come to a fire station or something to want a safe haven, they actually want to be in a discussion. If you get what I'm saying, like they're not worried about you're going to call my dad or something, but a lot of times when they come in, because they're basically a lot of times hurting people. I can't, I'm not going to have a baby, but anybody that's going through that, no matter what, they've got to be a hurting person because the whole situation, and I don't know all the psychology of it, but if you're a woman who has carried a baby to term and given birth, and then you're at a fire station, you've got to be a hurting person to me. And having a human, there could be negatives, right? So to that, but having a human interaction is by and large a much better scenario for everybody involved than put your baby in a box and slam the door. So
I was hoping to get these numbers before we spoke,
yeah,
of how many babies are surrendered in Ohio, and I haven't gotten the specific numbers
it's almost
yet,
impossible to find. Nobody keeps track of it.
Well, hopefully I will.
Okay.
I was told by Jobs and Family Services that they could try to provide that for me.
Okay.
But regardless, I spoke to him and he mentioned that it's a really low number and that it's very infrequent. So do you think it is worth investing in despite
in
this
safe
kind of
haven?
infrequency?
Yeah, just because I think it's an awareness thing of, if push come to shove, you can do this. And but I found that most of the I actually did something. I'm a very meticulous guy, and I went to every agency in Claremont County, fire and police, not hospitals. There's only one hospital in Claremont County though, but and most of them did not have safe haven awareness policy, safe haven policies, meaning what happens if somebody actually knocked on the door and had a baby in their arms, And so a few of them had really good policies. One of them was Loveland, if you've heard of Loveland, familiar with Loveland. They had a really good policy. It's called Central Joint Fire District, which is like Batavia. They had a really good policy, but they had not really implemented it. Okay, so it was written, but they hadn't actually done it. The sheriff's office had about 70% the way their policy. Like it was okay, but not. But they then completely redid their policy when I brought up to make it. And, I get along well with our sheriff's office. When I had raised the query, the guy who's the chief deputy, was named Chris Stratton, he told me, I got up and actually went to the front desk of the sheriff's office and asked him, what happens if a woman walked in here with a baby right now? And they actually had a materials, and they found the materials were out of date. They had a place they had the materials. But if you go look at that, or they put a picture on their Facebook, they now have implemented a safe haven awareness sign on the front of their building of what to do, and then the lobby and so forth, and they completely updated their policies. So I think that all of this is worth it from the standpoint of when the people who are pro boxes will say, like, isn't just one baby's life worth it? If we no matter, and I would say that from a standpoint of the signs, which are like $50 a place, that's worth it. Okay. $15,000 to put a box in. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I don't like the whole approach. I'm against it because of the approach more or less, but all that amount of money for something that, 90% of the baby boxes that are installed have never been used. And that could be used in much more effective ways, to help women and to help, and to raise awareness, that put into a school program to help people understand what these things are and so forth, or just to raise awareness. That money bundled and done like in Florida with a annual campaign of awareness or something, I think would be much more effective use of the money. I don't think that there's a lot of babies that the big issue is that there's not a box. I don't think that's the issue. I think Monica Kelsey went to South Africa, which, by the way, I've been to South Africa like 10 times. So I started talking with her about South Africa, and I realized she doesn't know anything about South Africa. She went there once. And, but, apparently she saw a box there and the Lord touched her and she needed to have these boxes. But there's a reason why we got rid of these kind of things. In the countries that tend to have them at this point, and I say I'm slipping backwards on it, they tend to be places that have issues with human trafficking and other things that go on, which is another dimension of these boxes that comes into play.
Well, one thing that we haven't gotten to that I really want to ask about is this like aspect of anonymity. And so, people, who want these baby boxes or who have installed a baby box talk about how it does make it easier, if you don't have to face someone to surrender your child. And I guess where do you stand on anonymity with
I think that if you're a woman who wants to surrender a baby under the safe haven law and you want anonymity and confidentiality, the worst thing you could do is put your baby in a safe haven baby box. Why? You know that right after now, and somebody told me that this is changing on one recently. After every surrender in a safe haven baby box, they press release the hell out of it. It ends up on CNN and other websites. They have a event at the fire station within a day or two of the surrender. Monica Kelsey tries to get information on the babies that were surrendered, which she has no right to do. And in Ohio, it's illegal. I mean, it happens. What happens is these people aren't that sophisticated at these fire stations, so they tell her, it was a, black baby, a white baby, a this, female, male, this. She has no right to any of that information. That all is supposed to be completely confidential, but that'll all get blasted all over the place. And so I keep bringing up is that these are little self-serving things. Is that you this notion of if she believes in anonymity and confidentiality, then the first thing is quit doing press releases, quit doing media events at the places. Quit having, Safe Haven Baby Box maintains a private baby registry of all the babies that have been surrendered in their boxes. And they use about a dozen of the babies in fundraising events. And all of that, if you talk to this Marley Griner or somebody in that, they just cringe at this stuff, because the kid has no ability to understand that at 3, 4, 5 years old, when they're up on stage dancing, at a fundraiser, and so there's a lot of people that are the long-term impact of that. So my point is that I think that anonymity and confidentiality are important. I just don't think that that needs a box. I think that, because you can walk up to, you can put on your hoodie, walk up to the fire station, hand the baby to them. You're not obligated to answer any questions or say anything and walk away. Okay. In real life, when these things happen, what the policies are supposed to be under Ohio statutes is that the fireman is supposed to ask the woman if they would consider filling out the state has a form that's a anonymous voluntary medical health history. Okay. And it's things on there like history of heart disease. I was on drugs, and so there's no name or anything on there. And so that information, so for example, when a baby goes in a box, it just isn't directly anonymity confidentiality, but for example, those things are very important. And when done right, my impression, I don't know that there's enough Ohio statistics, is that women that drop off babies fill these things out. They can walk, they're supposed to tell them, you can just hand me the baby and walk away. But if you would be willing to fill out a voluntary anonymous health history form, it would be very helpful. And most women would do that then at that point in time. I don't know the psychology of it, but I don't know. I feel like there are these outlier cases where somebody didn't know they were pregnant or something, and to be honest, and then I get jumped on about this, a lot of those things, thank God, they are outliers that a lot of times involve mental health and other issues that are not, like everybody drives over the speed limit on the highway. They're unique individual cases. But I think that the issue with anonymity and confidentiality, if people believe in that, then they should be the baby box people in particular should completely get rid of all this stuff they do about using the babies, the tracker, this. It's all antithetical to this idea of anonymity, confidentiality. If I were, like I said, circle back. If I were a woman wanting to give up a baby in Safe Haven, the last thing I would do is put it in a box, because I know there's going to be all this media circus that they're going to do around it. Mm. Frankly, when I bring these issues up, I don't think I have a very big voice. I'm just some hillbilly from Claremont County and so forth. But I know that Monica Kelsey watches everything I say. And so I start making this point, like, if you really want anonymity and confidentiality, don't put your baby in a box. And somebody told me, I didn't been following up, but there was a baby surrendered, the number incremented, because she keeps track how many babies were surrendered in the boxes. The number incremented and missed one. So people are starting to think that there's some places that are refusing to do press conferences. Traditional Safe Haven people would never do that. Okay. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons too is, that I think Ohio's 30 days, but in most places the woman has the right, they can't place the baby for a certain number of days because a woman has a right to come back and retrieve the baby. So there's a right under the law. If you surrender your baby in a safe haven, regardless, I think in Ohio it's 30 days. Most places it's 30 days. The woman can come back and ask for reunification. So the baby can't be permanently placed within those 30 days. And historically, about 25% of women who safe haven babies nationally come back and reclaim the baby. Okay. And so
where did you get that 25% number?
You could go to the National Safe Haven Alliance or somebody like that. That's a typical statistic that they use. Okay. I didn't come up with it, but it's a typical statistic that they use. And, so I believe it's true. And I believe that behind it, from talking to people behind it, is what happens sometimes is a woman in a crisis situation or puts a baby in a box, gets back home, maybe the father of the baby, mom and dad, whatever, find out about this. And contrary to the stigmatization of like, your dad's going to be screaming at you, this, okay, is that they receive an outpouring of love, of relatives and stuff that says like, oh no, like, it's okay, and so then they come back, okay, for the for
Mhm.
the for for the babies. So, but I only bring that up as that is a reason why traditional safe haven people are aghast at the notion of this promotion and publicity around it, because they believe it should be kept completely quiet, so that because they actually there's a lot of love between these people and Monica, and they think that the press conferences would deeply stigmatize the woman being able to come back.
Mm.
So if you gave up your baby and then you're like, oh, she's a hero, this the unbelievable. If you've watched any of the press conferences, it's always about the mom's an unbelievable hero that knew that she could not take care of her baby, so she gave up the baby, and that was an act of selfless love, and blah blah blah, and that all stigmatizes if that woman then wanted to come back, like, and get the
Mhm.
baby back. Like, well, what happened? I'm already a hero for not because I'm not competent to raise my baby. That's what got said,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's like another long ass answer to
Yeah. No,
anonymity
it's okay.
confidentiality.
I do want to make sure that we get to the Union Township baby
Yeah.
box. Can you talk me through what happened? My understanding is that you objected to that. Then there was a look at this Ohio staffing law in regards to baby boxes.
Yeah.
So can you just walk me through what happened there?
So the baby box got put in. I knew nothing about baby boxes, and I tangentially knew about safe haven, but I didn't know like that there was such a thing, like that say, but I didn't know any details. And so I was the Safe Haven Baby Box website says that they don't use any public money. Okay, that they use, and even if you go, World Magazine had an interview series with Monica in it just recently on a podcast series, and she said this again. Okay, like that we don't use any public money. Well, so in our township, it was all public money, and I've come to
Mm.
learn that most of these are done with taxpayer dollars. These boxes are most in Ohio. I have there's a couple at hospitals, so that's a different. The ones at fire stations, other than Delhi, I think they were all done with public dollars.
Okay.
But I haven't. I know Delhi had donors, but I started questioning why didn't we do a fund drive? Because by the way, the audiences around these boxes, if you wanted to raise 15 grand for the box and the installation, that would not be hard. That's not a hard fundraiser to have.
Yeah.
And so we never did that. So that caused me to start looking into the boxes. Then I realized that when the box we installed, they had no building permits, okay, which is the biggest violator of the laws is the government, by the way. If you haven't figured, it's like they didn't get building permits that they were supposed to have. They did not have staffing, and the staffing rules are not only in the Ohio Administrative Code, but they're actually in the provider guide that Monica Kelsey gives them. So the fire department got it. So they have like the Ohio laws in her book. And it's like, then I come to realize nobody read any of this. Okay,
Mm.
nobody read any of this before putting this box in. Then I got the materials that were in the box, which I could always send you, but the materials in the box were basically promotional literature for the baby box company and some completely half-baked medical thing that
Mm.
was like, if you're like that the one was supposed to take with them after you drop the baby off. It was like a one pager. If you have this, this is, and then at the bottom it said if you need medical attention, you to go to a midwifery center in Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Hmm.
because they had never updated this thing. It
Because
was for like,
and they're
and
based in
so
Indiana.
I'm like,
Yeah.
did anybody review any of this paperwork that went in the box? So that started the slippery slope of you've broken all these rules on this box, and nobody, even read nobody. You didn't even read the rules before you put this in, and so that's how it came. So then I kept
Mhm.
bitching. They claimed, which is baloney, that it wasn't costing them extra money to support the box. Okay.
Mm.
And so they kept it for whatever length of time it was, probably like only like 8 months or, 7, 8 months, and then shut it down because it's unaffordable with the having to have a staff there.
Yeah.
What happens at fire stations, by the way, most fire stations I've come to learn only have two people at them. Okay.
Hmm.
And so when they go on a run, like this station in particular had a fire truck and an EMT vehicle. When they go on a run, it's either you're getting a fire truck or they get in the EMT vehicle. And then, if they need to call firemen in off duty, if it's a big fire or something, they bring them from, but when most like 80% of all fire runs now are EMT, not fire. Okay. And when they go on an EMT run, both guys go, and the typical length of time if they have to transport somebody is 2 to 3 hours.
Mhm.
Because if they have to take them to like University Hospital, and then I didn't know this, that you might not want to know this, but if you get EMT'd to the hospital, the EMTs are not allowed to leave until the hospital clears them to leave. So when they take somebody in, the EMTs have to sit around until they get cleared to leave, and that could be like an hour, like that till they get cleared to leave So then I brought up there's like long periods of time. So then I actually this is either you'd hate me or love me for this, but then I didn't even know how to do this. I downloaded some app on my phone to listen to the dispatch frequency because they told me, oh, this never happens. And then I went to, and then I listened, and it was station, whatever that is, 52 or 50 or whatever it was, went on a call. Then I went to the station and nobody was there. And then it's like, okay, so I just showed nobody's here right now. And so that led to a slippery slope. They tried to fight it, yada, yada, yada. And then,
But did you bring that up? Sorry to interrupt, but did you bring that up at a city council meeting? What was like
to be township trustees? Yeah,
trustees. Okay.
Yeah, the guys are the trustees don't like me, and I'm not a fan of them. So
yeah,
you had a lot of it's emotional because of their not liking me, and I don't really understand. You'd have to ask the fire chief, Chief Dimling, when he shut it down. There's a lot of angst in the government in Union Township right now, but when he shut it down. He put up the sign they put up was the sign I designed. I designed it, my wife, and so this was like basically to me, he seems like a nice guy. I don't talk to him. I don't want to talk to him but it seems like the fire chief putting up the sign I had designed was a giant FU to the trustees. And then they proceeded to put those signs on every fire station in Union Township. So there's like 6, and every one of them has a safe haven awareness sign now on them. And I brought this up at the time too: is if we're going to have one box, why don't we have awareness signs on the other 5 stations that you can safe haven a baby here, or you could go to the box. Here's where the box is. And that was like no, because I tell you, I know I'm going on, but I tell you that number one toxic mix on these boxes is that somebody can make money off of them. And politicians love photo ops. So the photo op of I used to say online a lot because all the politicians in Claremont County that were there at the ribbon cutting, if you go look at the picture, they were all wearing red shirts except for like 2 people, and I always say, it got under their skin. They spent more time coordinating their red shirts than they did reading the actual laws for these boxes. So that's, I think one of the toxic things is it's a feel-good, pro-life-ish photo op. And then, which brings up another issue. Inner city communities are never going to have these boxes. It's never going to fly there. So you're actually putting them in places that are, it's just a feel-good right-wing. They're all in right-wing places. Because right-wing people, this is makes them feel good, like they're doing something. And we solve the problem by putting a box in. But that's how the Union Township evolved.
Gotcha. Thank you for taking me through that. I have to go at 2, but I want to make sure we get. We talked about staffing and how it is in the code, and I just want to hear your perspective on why these need to be staffed 24/7. Because I know, in other states like Indiana, they don't necessarily have that same requirement.
Actually, they do, and they don't follow it. So in Indiana, at a volunteer fire station, it's supposed to need to be staffed to be there. They also have rules about the proximity of the boxes to hospital emergency rooms and so forth that also don't get followed in Indiana. Because real quick, what happened in Indiana is the Department of Health that was against them got so browbeat, they don't do anything. They just ignore them now. So they can do that. None of the laws are enforced in Indiana, basically. So they actually do have rules, particularly they distinguish volunteer fire companies versus professional fire companies. But the code actually has different rules for volunteer and for staffing and so forth, but they don't get enforced. On the staffing in Ohio, that is, so the baby boxes in Ohio started in 2018. Okay, they were authorized in 2017, started 2018. You may or may not be familiar with, there's Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Administrative Code. The Ohio Revised Code says in it, the Department of Health shall promulgate rules around the boxes. That's basically all it says when it authorizes the boxes. Ohio Administrative Code is the rules, and that's true for every agency in Ohio. It has the same effect as law, but it's a different document. And so the rules were promulgated in 2018. Rules and agency rules like those have to be reviewed every 5 years. The review for the rules in Ohio was done in the summer of 2022. As you might know, if you look at, I participated. I spoke at a thing about it, and Monica, nobody on the other side participated. And the rules were renewed as they are, which included the staffing rule. I actually wanted them to add more, but I was thrilled that they didn't take the staffing rule out of there. But the idea that people like Monica, oh, it's old, antiquated rules. It's this. No, they were rules from 2018 and they were renewed in 2022. And I think the reason why it's so important is the alarms don't work on the boxes for sometimes. I can't make it up. So the Sunbury, Ohio box closed because its alarm wasn't working. It was listed, I wrote this down. Starting in July of 2022, it was listed on the Safe Haven Baby Box site as out of service. I contacted them to ask why. It was because the alarm didn't work and they couldn't get the alarm working. And they couldn't get parts that they thought they needed to fix the alarm. And they ultimately closed the box in October of 2022. So the alarm systems on the box is the idea of an unstaffed box. They have I think I said this when we talked before. A Simply Safe for $350 for your house has more advanced technology for alarms than these boxes do. The boxes have no cellular backup on the alarms, and the intent of the rules in Ohio is that the alarm part is a backup to the person. So the way it's actually worded in the code is if somebody puts a baby in a box, an in-building alarm is supposed to go off. And if the door isn't open on the other side for the baby is within a minute, it's like a minute or 2 minutes, then there's supposed to be a secondary alarm to 911. So the alarm is supposed to be the backup to the person being there.
Okay.
And if you look in, there was an Enquirer story, but the Department of Health will comment on this if you find them. They'll comment on the rules they have in the past. Okay, what else? I'm not going to talk too much, and we've got to get the time.
Okay, so I guess my last question would be, in regards to safe haven laws, sorry, I'm going to rephrase this, but in the Supreme Court discussion around abortion, safe haven laws were brought up. And I guess with the reversal of Roe and abortion access being contested in Ohio, how do you see safe haven laws playing a role in that new kind of landscape?
I think it's way too early to tell, so and it's a good marketing opportunity to sell more boxes, so there's some sudden change, there's a change, but and I know change like this, ultimately the changes in this stuff are cultural, and so there's courts. But this stuff goes on for years. And Ohio is a good example of that right now, right? It'll go on for years. There'll be a constitutional thing. It's not like, on both sides, you get people that act like there's something and then suddenly it's like, an entirely different universe. And that's not really the way things work or evolve. So I think there's a lot of things that have not yet been kind of laid out. And I don't think that there's some huge influx in safe havens now because of Roe v. Wade. It's way, way too early in the process. And hopefully all this results in, a focus on people, apart from your views on abortion, knowing, the concept of that a woman that is with a pregnancy should get proper prenatal care, et cetera. These aren't controversial points. That, and so I just feel like it's just marketing right now. It's spin, to get, and I'm sure Supreme Court justices know a lot, but I don't know that they spend a lot of time worrying about safe haven laws, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being willing to chat with me. Do you have any?
Yeah, let me real quick. So I appreciate this. So the other hot button things for me that I bring up we've covered most of what's on my list is safety testing of the boxes. So the boxes are not UL or ETL listed. The reason why they lease the boxes versus sell them is because it avoids Consumer Product Safety Commission regulations. So if they were sold, they have to have certain testing. Okay, by leasing them, they're avoiding testing. But Monica said, I know you said you're doing a broader story than this, but going back to 2016, and I can share videos of this, she's always going to release some testing on these boxes, but the testing has never been released. And it's just bizarre to me, the oddity of like, oh, a life is worth whatever it costs, but it's not worth having any safety testing. It's not worth requiring ground fault interruption on a 15 amp appliance. Think about this, like you walk, rainy night, that kind of thing. So that's one. The second thing I think is the boxes themselves, if anybody paid attention, they're highly ineffective, really. If you look, they have 135 boxes in since 2016 is when they started, but their boxes have ramped up. They've had like 24, 25 in there. There's somewhere on the average of 20. The last time there was a number I saw that was credible published, 22,000 babies a year are left at hospitals by women who give birth and don't retrieve the baby. Okay. And that's called a border baby. It's not technically safe haven. It's technically a different thing, but it just give that comparison of 25 babies in, 5 years or something versus 22,000 babies a year that are left at hospitals by moms that give birth and walk out the door. So there are 144,000 babies a year who are adopted in America. So these are like rounding error numbers, and there's just, it's just disingenuous to act like this is having some unbelievable impact. And let me see, that might be everything on my list. And and then the last thing I'll bring up is that they were in the heat of Monica trying to get the rules changed. She had a TikTok, an anti-Ohio Department of Health TikTok campaign for 43 days straight. She was granted a meeting then. She had not participated in the process, and then she wouldn't come to the meeting because they wouldn't let her bring fire chiefs with her. So it's kind of like you saying she wouldn't be an interview or something. It's always got to be very controlled. But any event, I think safe haven's good. I don't like boxes. I think the perfect world would be nobody ever uses safe haven. Okay, that it's an awareness. It becomes an awareness thing, but it's there, and hopefully that every woman that has an unplanned pregnancy doesn't feel stigmatized into things like, I'm going to keep my pregnancy secret and put my baby in a box. That's the worst. That they get proper prenatal care, proper medical delivery, know their adoption and custody options, know their help options, and get counseling. And if they want to be able to keep their baby, that there are people in the community that are willing to help them with that versus try to exploit them to get that baby because, people want babies. And very last thing, okay, is the trafficking aspect of these. I've asked every time a baby's surrendered in a box or even safe haven, there should be a anti-trafficking protocol to see if there have been any snatched babies, any of this, any of that in the area. People don't want to listen to that, but that's another thing before my clock switches to 2 is just to ponder is that there should be protocols in place so that if a baby gets surrendered in Union Township, the police should do a check to see if any babies have been reported as abducted, for example. And nobody does that because there's a push to get babies free and clear. I don't know if you know this, but there's people that want free and clear babies with no strings attached that can get put into the adoption system. And right now in other states, Monica Kelsey is trying to get to a position where they can align with an adoption provider and keep the babies outside of the departments of health, which is a recipe for disaster, is that then should never be allowed, that the person running these boxes has a connection, sets up the network for distributing the babies that are put in boxes. That's just every level wrong. So anyway, my clock says 2:00.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking with me.